Welcome
to the Age of Awakening.
Please identify yourself. Enter.
Hey, welcome back, Triple P Nation. This week, we're going to explore the tools, tactics, and strategies to help you achieve personal and business mastery. And boy, do I have a guest for you this week. My guest is Roshan Chhotu. And he's a remarkable guy with an incredible story who started doing ultramarathons. And his path from being a sedentary, typical corporate guy, no time for exercise, into doing these races through some of the most grueling deserts on the planet is really inspiring. And of course, it led to a new business and a brand new book about innovation in business. He's a really exceptional individual. So a little bit more about his intro. He is a strategist, a consultant, an ultramarathon runner, and adventurer. He is the commercial director at 5 Ways to Innovate, which is the name of the new book that's coming out soon. He's also co-authored that. He is a strategy and operations leader at Google. So Roshan shares what he's learned in the process of going from 0 to 150 and how he overcame the mental barriers, because as you're going to learn, there's a lot, and how he's dealt with life-threatening injuries that's pushed him to the limits of what he thought it was humanly possible for him. So in the process, he's inspired hundreds of professionals to unlock their inner champion to win their own personal ultramarathons, both in work and in life. Again, great interview coming up. Now, before I get to Roshan, of course, it wouldn't be a normal episode if we don't start with our success snack, which is about future self-visualization exercise. What's all that about, Jay? Well, you guys, I've talked about it is GPS to Success Summit year or quarter, right? We do it in November of each year. This year is November 8th and 9th. And one of the things we talk about is future self. We talk about goal setting. We talk about creating values. And then from those values, we're able to determine our highest desires. And therefore, we built our goals that are congruent with our highest priorities. And if you remember last week's show, we talk about highest priorities are essential to achieving all your goals. So this is one tool to help you kind of determine, is this a goal you should pursue or not? So one of the best, most effective recommendations I can make for people questioning whether they should pursue a goal is to conduct this future self-visualization exercise. So in this exercise, I want you to imagine yourself 5 or 10 years from now into the future, okay? I want you to imagine having either pursued a goal or not. So let's say right now you're thinking about opening a business, or maybe you want to move to a different part of the country and start over, or maybe you want to attract that special mate, okay? So I want you to think about what it would be like to pursue that goal. And what if you did not pursue that goal? And I want you to be vivid with it. I want you to picture, this is very important, how you feel. Because part of the manifestation process is not just putting a goal out there, right? Creating a strategic plan to achieve that goal, but feeling what it's going to be like when you achieve that goal. What are the emotions you're going to experience? Because it's the energy, the vibration of the emotion tied to the clarity of the picture that ultimately is going to get you to manifest what it is that you want. Now, I want you to think about the opportunities or the regrets that you may encounter in both scenarios, because they're going to help you gain clarity on the potential long-term impact of either decision. So this can help you really tap into the deeper motivations so you can make more informed and better choices. Now, again, if you haven't done so recently, and if you didn't know, we're on YouTube now. So go over to YouTube and check out Roshan, handsome guy. And I'm there too. You know, somebody's got to up-level the podcast here. So we are on YouTube. We're on all your favorite podcast apps. And again, if you like this interview, pass it on to other people. But again, I was talking about the summit. Sorry, squirrel, that's me. If you're interested, you want to join us at the summit, I'm personally inviting you to do so. It'll be the best decision you make going into 2025. As a serious high performer, as somebody who's really committed to growing and improving, this is a must. Right? It's making a commitment to yourself, taking the time to plan with no distractions, what 2025 success looks like for you. By the way, that's how it occurs. It doesn't happen randomly. It happens with intention and a plan, and being surrounded in an environment and a vibration and emotion and feeling with people who are doing the same thing, to be able to network with these people, to learn and grow in ways that you can't possibly imagine. I'm regularly told often, and by the way, when you go to the link, you'll see all the testimonials there, but regularly told often, this was a game changer. It changed my life. People have gone on to work on movies. People have gone on to start new businesses, get involved in real estate and all kinds of major changes in their life, find that perfect person. And look, it's not me, it's the material. I just deliver it, but I deliver it in a really powerful and impactful way that I believe will be life-changing for you. So join us at the 2024 GPS to Success Summit. The theme this year is Unleash Your Inner Superhero. We all have them. It's there. I'm going to teach you how to do it. So this year, as I mentioned, you can go to our powerpassionprosperity.com, powerpassionprosperity.com, go to the shop tab. The drop down, the first link will be 2024 Summit. Go there, check it all out, learn more about it, sign up and join us, be a part of it. It's going to be amazing. Okay, without further ado, here is my interview with Roshan. Enjoy. Hey, Triple P Nation, welcome back. As I mentioned in my opening, really excited to have Roshan Chhotu. Roshan is a strategist, consultant, ultramarathon runner, and adventurer. He's going to tell some of those stories about that. But he's also coming out with a new book, 5 Ways to Innovate, he's co-authoring with. Really excited to talk about this particular topic because so many of you who are in business know that innovation is a key to ongoing success within your business. So without further ado, welcome, Roshan.
Welcome, Dr. J. Good to be here.
Yeah. So in our pre-interview conversation, you told me you're in Singapore and it's 5 a.m. there.
That's right. It's an early start, but I like to wake up early and get ahead of the day. So this works great.
So let me start there. One of the things I talk about is for success and high performers, right? You have to have a plan. Do you get up early each day and prepare your mind for success? Do you do things to set yourself up to make sure you maximize your time, your efficiency, and outcomes for each day? Is that part of your plan?
I have gone back and forth on this. There's been periods where I get up at 4 a.m. and really attack the day and get ahead of it. There's times where I've had to be more of a night owl to work with the US a lot more. What I found over time is I prioritize sleep. So all the best guidance out there says you should have a rigorous sleep schedule. I try to maintain that, but what I find helps the most is making sure I can get the 7 to 8 hours of sleep whenever that happens. So if that means sometimes I get to bed early, wake up early and attack the day, great. If that means I've stayed up late to get things done, I just plan around a later morning, but getting the sleep both physically and mentally works wonders for me. It's not always easy. Like, this isn't a thing I've completely mastered and nailed down, but it's a guiding principle to always make sure I can get my 7 to 8 hours.
I think you really hit on a very important point. Not everybody needs the same quote unquote formula for success. Some people require more rest. Some people need to get outside and, get in nature, feel the grass on their feet and sun on their face, exercise, whatever it might be. I think the key point that you're making here is we need to really identify the things that fill our energy tank back up after a rigorous day and to make sure that we're prepared for the next day to succeed. So for you, sleep is an important element. And I would argue for most people, but I know people, man, who do 3 or 4 hours a day and they're like, they get stuff done and they don't drag. So it's so unique for each individual.
I think that's right. I envy people who can survive on 3 to 4 hours of sleep.
Yeah, I'm not one of them. All right, so let's start with you got into ultramarathon running. So first of all, differentiate, because I know a lot of our listeners are runners and stuff. What's the difference between ultramarathons and regular marathons?
A regular marathon is a 27-mile or 42-kilometer foot race. An ultramarathon technically is anything longer than 27 miles. The accepted wisdom is that it's above 30 miles. The type that I have got into are 150-mile races,
Wow.
split over multiple days.
So are you running all that time or what?
The events that I do, the participants are split. About 20% of people will run the entire thing. About 60% of people will walk and run. And the remaining 20 will do a very brisk walk through the entire 150 miles. And it's a brisk walk because there is a cutoff time. So if you don't hit certain checkpoints by a certain time, they withdraw you from the race. My own journey, I started off as a walk runner and have built up to eventually running all of the 150 miles.
Okay, so as a lifelong fitness guy, the longest I've done is 10Ks. I'm not built like a marathoner. You look like you are built like an ultramarathoner. Different body types for different activities. So how did you get into it? In other words, what motivated you? What the hell is the training like?
Yeah, so I'd describe my journey as a 0 to 150. 5 years ago, I was just your regular guy. I was a management consultant traveling 5 days a week. I had the whole travel thing locked down, like no belts to make airport security easy, everything folded away and tucked away and carry on. I had no time for exercise. I was always on the move. And probably more important to this 0 to 150 story is growing up, I hated cross-country running. I was always last, if not second last, through school. I'd never run more than a few miles in my life. I remember once, maybe about 7 or 8 years ago, I managed to do a 5-mile run. And I was very chuffed and very pleased with myself, but very quickly fell off the wagon as work got in the way and I resorted back to a mostly sedentary life. As I made my way through my 20s, like the corporate lifestyle, I was more often than not trading exercise for after work drinks. And, the pounds started adding up. So I'm very pleased for you to say I look like an ultra runner physique now. That was definitely not the case 5 years ago. And really how I got into this, it was the Friday before Christmas, back in 5 or 6 years ago, 2018. And I'm a management consultant. I'm doing my final skip level meeting and it's hit 6 p.m. I've delayed this meeting through the day, but it's my team. It's important to me. But it's a Friday before Christmas. So I asked this individual, do you mind if we do this last meeting in a pub? And they were happy. It was just a career conversation. And this person was having a lot of motivation issues at work. So I was giving some advice, probably more unfounded back then than it would be now, but talking about incrementality. So you can't just get to the top of your field, you have to build your way up. And as you make incremental progress, that keeps you motivated to keep pushing. And there was this guy sat at the end of our table in the pub, and he leans over into the conversation and says, hey, everything this guy's telling you about motivation is 100% right. I've run 4 ultramarathons through deserts, and that is how you build up to achieving something. I was completely blown away at this point. This is a regular, normal-looking person who's just said he's run 4 150-mile races through some of the most extreme deserts on the planet. And so that became the rest of the pub conversation. I just kept talking to him, and he reassured me to finish one of these races. It's a mental challenge, not a physical challenge, and that anyone can do it as long as you have the mental fortitude. I was always proud of my mental fortitude over physical aptitude, and so I signed up there and then. I was sold. This person, after 2 beers, convinced me that I can go from 0 to 150 miles. I signed up for a race that was 7 months later in Mongolia through the Gobi Desert. And so I turned to him, I showed him the confirmation screen on the phone, and I said, hey, I've signed up for it. And he said, sure, you've signed up for it, but put the deposit down. Once you put the money down, that's when you're really signed up. Because you could pull out of this tomorrow and there's no harm. So it's like, okay, you have a point. So I took out the credit card and put put a deposit down for the race. And I was like, you are absolutely right. I'm going to finish up, I'm going to pay for the rounds, and I need to head home. And so for the first time in years, 10 p.m. on a Friday night, I was walking home instead of staying out having drinks because I needed to wake up and start running the next day. And on the way home, this thought occurred to me. I was tipsy enough. I think everyone has a number that you can write off. As long as nobody knows about it, you can treat it as an expensive lesson learned, but you can write off some amount of money. And I thought about this deposit money, and I thought, there is some version of me tomorrow morning who's going to back away from this and consider it an expensive lesson learned. So I took a screenshot of the confirmation email and sent it out to a bunch of WhatsApp groups and sent it to friends. And so now, added to the financial commitment was social commitment. You can write off money, but you can't write off face. And that's how I ended up signing up for my first ultramarathon.
That's a great story. I love that. We always talk about accountability, right? But the social commitment of putting it out there amongst your friends who you respect, and you want their respect. Now it's out there. Can I ask you what the sum of money was?
It was $1,000.
Okay, so not a small amount of money.
Yeah, if I didn't go through with it, that would sting. That would sting.
Sure, of course. So incremental progress and social commitment. I love that. Two really great takeaways there. Okay, so you started your journey. You got up the next day, went for a walk, went for a run, and what was the training like? How 7 days a week? How many miles a day? What did that look like?
So, the first thing is, what do you do the morning after you tipsily sign up for an ultramarathon? You put on your running shoes, you get up and you go running. And my run that Saturday morning was just 2 to 3 miles at best. It wasn't long, but that run was probably the most important run I did in training for an ultramarathon, because it got me from 0 to 3 miles. And then even if I just keep adding 3 miles every few days, I can eventually get up to 150 miles. But getting from nothing to something was the most important step, I think, looking backwards. And it did two things for me. It made me believe, one, running wasn't too bad. So I had naive belief I can do this. And it also made me realize it wasn't so easy. I can just wing the next 7 months, and that I'm going to have to put in some work, because I genuinely had the fear of dying in a desert in me. And that was a huge motivating factor to say, I've sent this message out to a bunch of friends. It would be incredibly embarrassing if I didn't do the work and something happened to me in the desert. And so with the first run under the belt, in a movie, this is usually where you'd cut to a montage and do about 7 months in 2 minutes of training. The reality is a lot less glamorous. I did a bunch of YouTube research, built out a training plan. I boiled the management consulting, like the corporate life rigor kicks in, and I boiled everything down to one metric. And that metric was time on feet. And so I said, okay, if I ignore all the complexity and all the advice out there, if I optimize for one thing and I maximize time on feet every week to get from 0 to 150, that will be the most important thing I can do. And so a lot of my training went around this time on feet concept. And I'm more of a principle-based person than a planner. So even though I had this long spreadsheet that mapped out every single day for the next 7 months, the principles were more important to me, because I guess, was it Eisenhower who said, I find planning indispensable, but plans utterly useless. So the principles were, I need to be running 4 days a week, with one of those as a long run. I need to do a back-to-back long run every week to get used to running on tired legs. And I shouldn't increase those long runs more than by 10% per week to avoid injury. So you can't just go to 150 miles overnight. The body needs time to adapt. So with all of those principles in place, the training plan roughly looked like 4 days a week of some form of running, whether that's short or long runs, and 2 days, 1 or 2 days of strength training, and then some flexibility around 1 or 2 days of rest. but an active rest day, so some form of yoga or stretching. And I built in some slack in the plan. So with the longest distance increasing by 10% per week, I wanted to hit a marathon distance before the race to get to about 40 kilometers, about 25 miles. And I took the social commitment part really important. Like I made that work for me. So a bunch of those friends who were on the WhatsApp group would eventually come out with me for some of the shorter runs and keep me company on some of the short runs, the long runs, or even really long hikes. And through all of it, I mean, I had planned out as we all would, a linear progress. I'll just keep increasing 10% per week, maybe have 1 or 2 weeks off because it'll be my birthday or a friend's thing. And that would be great, right? You go up and to the right. That's how progress works. The reality was different. About 3 months of solid training in, I got horrible tendinitis just where the glute connects to the hip. It was this constant pinging pain every time I moved. And so I went to a doctor who'd run exactly the same race that I had. And they said, you just need to rest 6 weeks and you'll be back on training. And so now I didn't have 6 weeks to spare in this 7-month training plan. That's a month and a half. But the discipline prevailed. I took the time off, did a lot of yoga and stretching, almost exactly as the doctor said. 6 weeks later, it had completely gone, and I was able to get back into the plan and, keep going and take a lot of those lessons learned. By the time I reached the peak of my training, I was covering 45 to 50 miles in a week. And from 0 to 6 months, I went from 0 to 22 miles in one shot. So the longest I had run at that point was 22 miles in a day during one of my long runs. And with that, honestly, I felt ready. I was like, okay, let's just bring this race on tomorrow. This is the best I'm going to do. And so I felt very confident going into Mongolia.
Okay, so I was going to ask you about injury. Somebody who wasn't training, and all of a sudden you putting all these miles on. The compressive load to the lower body extremities is cumulative. It's very, very difficult. And you're a young man. So yeah, first thing I think of is feet. You must have good feet because it's one of the first things people notice, either plantar fasciitis or shin splints or knee pain or things like that. Outside of the hip, did you have any experience with those?
I didn't have any shin splints or anything like that. The feet got very sore. I did build in a few bits of training specifically for the feet. The two that I think made the most difference, one is about once every week and a half or 2 weeks, I would go out barefoot. And that's either like running or walking on grass, or in the building I stayed in, there's the emergency fire escape stairs, and the building is about 10 stories high. So I would go barefoot up and down these stairs, and it would both help with strength training because you're lifting load vertically upwards, but also barefoot, there were some stone stairs and then some metal grill stairs, and that would just toughen up the feet and prevent, strengthen the feet and the actual skin on the soles of the feet, so that I become a bit more blister proof. And then the second is, a lot of ankle work. Some of the best advice said, ultramarathons are a weak link problem. You can train to your strength as much as you want, but once you're 30, 40, 50 miles into this race, the weakest muscle in your body is going to be the thing that brings you down. And so all of these small little muscle groups in the ankles and the knees needed strengthening because they were the ones that were going to create the problems once you're some decent miles in. So, a lot of, tiptoe walking with some weights, box jumps, those types of things helped, but not enough. Like 7 months to go from 0 to 150, there was still a lot of training left.
Sure. This is a cool story, and I promise we're going to get to your book soon. But I've got more questions on this because you're the first person I've ever met who's done.
Please do,
yes. I have a very, very, very good friend of mine who's done a lot of these extreme races, or 24 hours up and down mountains and carrying boulders and things and he's a nut. You got to be a special person to be able to even want to do it, let alone to accomplish it and do it well. I've always found in life, particularly in business, the most successful are people who are really good at discipline and commitment, like runners. People who put a lot of miles on. And you talked about the overcoming the mental blocks, obstacles. You're more likely to break down emotionally than you are physically first. However, there is a condition when you put so much stress on the body that can cause your muscles start to consume itself. It's called rhabdomyosis. I'm assuming that's an issue during these ultra marathons, and that is a medical emergency. So, are you familiar with that? And is that something that ultra marathoners have dealt with?
I'm loosely familiar with it. I think the races I do, muscle loss is expected because the format of the race is it's 150 miles in total. It's split over 6 days. So you're running a marathon every day. That's about 27 miles every day. One of the days is a double marathon, an 80-kilometer day, about 50 miles. And you're carrying everything you need to survive on your back. So all of your food, your sleeping bag, first aid kit, band-aids, everything you need. Everything except a tent and water, which the race organizers provide.
Through the desert. And how heavy is the pack?
Through the desert. The packs range in weight. Mine was a 22-pound pack. It was a 10.5 kilogram pack. And so it's expected that you are not carrying enough calories in your bag to take you through 6 days, because to carry all the calories you need, your pack becomes way too heavy. And the heavier your pack, the slower you go. There's this huge trade-off game that you're playing with. And so generally, most people will carry about 2,000 to 2,500 calories a day. Depending on your weight and size, you'll be burning off between 4 to 6, even 8,000 if you're on the heavier end. I learned my body weight. I can take 2,200 calories a day, and I'm burning off around 4,500. So it's about a 2,000 calorie deficit a day. And making sure you get the right mix of nutrition so that you've got enough proteins and fats is super important, just so your body can maintain the muscle it needs. And then it's going to be getting rid of anything else you don't need. So we don't use any chest or upper body strength through 6 days. Those muscles are decimated by the end of the race.
And so, how much water are you carrying, or hydration? It's because by volume it's heavy.
So the 10.5 kilos, the 22 pounds is without water. The format of the race gives you access to water roughly every 7 miles, and you're required to leave every checkpoint with 1.5 liters of water minimum. Sometimes it's 2.5 if you're going through a particularly gnarly, hot area where they can't get support vehicles to, so you have enough to be able to take yourself through. So really, in day one of this race, you've got a 22-pound pack and you're carrying an additional 3 or 4 pounds of water every 7 miles. So the weight adds up. Like it.
For sure. And how many pairs of shoes do you carry? You use one the whole time?
Yep. Everything is a weight trade-off. So everyone I think I've only met 1 or 2 people who will bring a spare pair of shoes, but most people will just bring the 1 pair of shoes for the entire race. You pick them well. They're going to have to deal with sand dunes, shale, salt flats, things that can really tear the shoes up. We might be on dirt tracks for a while, so they need enough padding where it feels like they can cope with a road race. But really, if a pair of shoes weighs 1 or 2 pounds, you don't want to be carrying an extra 1 or 2 pounds worth of weight. That's not calories. You're
sure
rather just deal with a bad pair of shoes and carry the extra food. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So you sleep, I'm assuming. Is there a place where you can clean up? There's taking care of business. You know what I'm saying? It's like, so I guess I want some more of those details.
There is. So there is no showering for 6 days.
Nice.
Water in a desert is pretty hard to come by. The race organizers are hauling, truckloads of bottled water through, and so all of that is for consumption. I did take just a flannel, these small dehydrated towels you can get. They appear just like a tube of candy, and you can pull them out, just put a little bit of water on it, and the whole thing opens up, and I can, maintain some hygiene in the most important places with a wet towel. In subsequent races, I've now take these really thin, lightweight, dehydrated, like sheets of soap. You get them just in like a little tab, you pull one off. As soon as you add some water, it crumples down and becomes soap. And so, yeah, wet towel concept, but everything's dehydrated. You don't want to carry extra weight. Actual business, I think the Gobi race was the worst setup for this. In most of the other races, they're able to get chemical toilets or portaloos through to all of the camp. In Mongolia, the logistics and the supply chain isn't that great. So every day, some guys would dig a really big hole and put 2 planks of wood either side of it and put a tent up around it. And, day 1 and 2, it's a bit, you're like, oh, okay, I can kind of get used to this. But if you've just gone from 0 to 150 miles in 7 months, by day 3 and 4, you can't squat. You can't. It's really hard. Yeah. And so you're holding on to everything you can just to get business done and get out of there as quickly as possible because your legs are beat.
Sure. Okay, so tell me what it was like. I'm assuming you finished, you completed it. I mean, you can tell us how you finished or not. I think it's more the accomplishment of just getting done. And then how long did it take your body to recover, and what the hell did you feel like?
Yeah, 2 great questions. Let me spend a bit of time on the first one because everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face, and that was definitely true of my experience of this first race. So the race starts off really well. It's a sunny day in Mongolia. The people are lovely. The ground on day 1 feels like it's disappearing under my feet. I feel really good. I've got this small echo of a voice from the guy I met in the pub who'd got me into all of this saying, hey, just remember, day 1 is the easiest because you've got fresh feet, rested legs, but your pack is heaviest. So day 1 and 2, take it easy. Everyone always feels great on day 1 and 2. But I was like, no, I'm feeling really good. Everything's moving. We're going. So day 1 is a 23-mile day. We had 100 contestants. I came in somewhere in the 30s, and I was feeling really good. There was still a little voice that said, hey, you still have 127 miles to go. But I was feeling very confident. Day 2 was a colder day. Like, believe it or not, in the middle of this desert, I was shivering as this misty rain descends on us. But other than feeling a little bit sore, I got warmed up and I just started covering ground. First 5 miles disappears very quickly. And then off in the distance, probably about a mile away, I can see a hill that we have to climb. So my prep kicks in. I'm like, okay, I'm going to take one of these 100-calorie gels, and that will fuel my ascent, and I'll be able to get up this hill pretty quickly. And so roughly when you're a mile away is the time you want to take the calories, because by the time your body digests and gets the sugar into the bloodstream, it'll be about 10-15 minutes. So by the time I get to the hill, I've got all this energy. I'm like zooming up, and I get to the top, I feel great. And then as I start descending this hill, I still feel great. And so I attack this hill downhill very aggressively. And the next 5 miles, I'm flying down through this valley, down the hill, cutting across through this valley. The coldness disappears. I'm like feeling really warm. And then I feel this niggle in my right knee. And I think, okay, no problem. I've trained for this. I did my breathing exercises to try and get some relaxation into the knee, because in my training I found a lot of niggles that you feel can be breathed away if you get the mind focused on almost resetting your body, like saying that doesn't exist, let's get back to a neutral state. But it just gets worse and worse and worse, and soon this flying feeling goes to a slow jog, goes to a bit of a walk, and I'm limping on this knee. And so what went wrong? Well, the first thing is rookie error. I didn't train for downhills. Nobody ever does because you think they're easy, but they're actually technically hard. The second most important thing is never introduce anything new to your race, and I had unwittingly did that. So these gels that I was using, I had trained with them and they were completely fine, but I bought a fresh box for my race, and what I didn't realize is half of the gels that I'd bought had caffeine in them and half of them didn't. And so this gel that I took just before this hill gave me half a cup or quarter a cup of coffee of caffeine. And so that feeling of me flying up the hill and flying down it was really just this caffeine kicking in, which I had never trained with. I'd never consumed, other than a cup of coffee in the morning, I didn't use any sort of gels with caffeine in it through my training runs. And so I didn't really know how to deal with this burst of energy from caffeine that came. But to my detriment, it caught up with me. And so I just had to deal with it in Mongolia in the middle of the Gobi Desert. So that day, day two, I just powered on and I ended up walking into camp. I checked with the race doctors. They said, look, we're 99% sure that you're not going to cause any serious harm to yourself by continuing. Really, it's a pain tolerance game for you to finish this race. But as soon as you stop running, this thing's going to calm down and you'll be fine. We think 99% sure. That was enough for me. A lot of these doctors are seasoned runners themselves, so there's a lot of not just medical experience but running and wisdom. So this was just a mental grind for the rest of the race. It was just a mental game. None of the physical training really helped me from that point onwards. So the game plan started off was, go from checkpoint to checkpoint, 7 to 8 miles at a point, refill water, reset. Eventually that got harder and it was counting 3 miles at a time. And then my left knee started hurting because it was overcompensating for my right knee. And so by day 4, the 50-mile day, I was just going from flag to flag, these course markings, these pink flags that tell you where to go. I'm just breaking this big problem down into flag to flag. And then by sunset, both my ankles were swelling up because they're now overcompensating for the knees that weren't working. And so I'm down 2 ankles and 2 knees. And I've just broken this entire thing down into left foot, right foot. So what became hey, just take each day as it comes, to take each checkpoint as it comes, to take each flag as it comes, became left foot, right foot, just incremental progress, just keep moving forward. And then by the time this 50-mile day was over, like I remember getting into camp, it's 1 a.m. I've been out there for 15, 16 hours, actually 16, 17 hours. And the worst part was still having to go to the bathroom at the end of this with 2 non-functioning ankles and knees and having to try and squat down and make everything work. The next day was another marathon day, a 27-mile day, and that was just limping my way through to camp. And then the following morning, Saturday morning, 6 days after I started, I couldn't bend my knees at all, but I crossed the finish line with this weird scissor walk across the finish line with these legs that won't bend. But I did it. I got from 0 to 150 miles and it wasn't easy. And so afterwards it takes probably 2 or 3 weeks just for the knees to calm down and to get some mobility back. And within about 4 weeks, they were completely fine. I was walking and running as usual. The body itself, surprisingly for me, it just only took a few days for the body to calm back down. There was the very real, the hunger you get from running a calorie deficit for 6 days. And so anything that looked and smelled like a carbohydrate, my body was just vacuuming up without a second thought. But yeah, the body calmed down. Like I think part of it, as long as you get enough nutrition and sleep, for my body, this was just a training thing. So it felt like came out stronger because it looked like training. And the sleep was so important in all of this. You know, the good thing about these races is you're in the middle of a desert. We have no internet. You're not carrying any laptops because everything you carry is functional. And so once the sun sets at about 6 or 7 p.m., there is nothing to do other than sit around a campfire and talk to people. And once it gets cold, all you want to do is go into your tent, curl up into your sleeping bag. And so I'm probably going to sleep at about 8, 9 p.m. and waking up at 5 a.m. There's at least 9, 10 good hours of quality rest. Well, you're still in a sleeping bag in a desert, but there is long sleep. And so I think just carrying on that sleep after the race, recovered, and then your brain starts to think about what next, because you've just achieved this really big thing. And then there's this emptiness after you've achieved a really big goal in life that comes a day or two afterwards. Because I've spent 7 months with the singular purpose every single day. I wake up and what I need to do today is train so I don't die in a desert. And now I don't have that anymore. And so it only took about 2 or 3 weeks before I signed up for the next race.
So therefore you went on and done more. So what have you learned about yourself all through this? You talked about the mental challenge. What did you learn about yourself that you didn't know before?
I think I've now run 4 ultra races. Each one I had a different goal and each had a different unexpected lesson. And I think the goals are really important. Having realistic goals has been a big thing I carried through all of them. So the first one I did in the Gobi, the goal was just finish and just do this for myself to prove that I can. And other than the unexpected lesson that beer is better than coffee, because beer can get you into something great, but coffee can really ruin your chances of finishing that. The unexpected lesson is break big problems into small problems. Going from 0 to 3 miles was the most important thing, and then getting from 3 to 6, and then eventually getting up to 150. And then even during the race, like every day is 27 miles, but that means running about 7 to 8 miles at a time. And then when that wasn't working, breaking it down into 3 miles. And then when that wasn't working, breaking it down flag by flag. And when that didn't work, breaking it down to the smallest component of what you're doing, which is left foot, right foot. So finding the smallest increments of progress you can in what you're trying to achieve and counting that. So break big problems into small problems. My next race was the Atacama race in Chile. It's about 9 to 10,000 feet above sea level. It's the driest desert on the planet. It's got altitude, it's got dryness. There's a bunch of challenges with that one. The terrain was incredibly technical with 2 different types of salt flats. But my goal was to enjoy it, because I just finished this other race where I did not enjoy it. It was painful. It was a struggle. And I wanted the next one to look and feel effortless. And that was not a speed goal. That's just, I wanted to enjoy it. And that meant I was running the entire time. That meant I could stop and take pictures on my phone. And that meant I was injury free. And the unexpected lesson in that one, because COVID happened in between. So there was years of training, and I broke a leg while training for that one and almost had to restart all of my training from 0 because I couldn't walk or run for 3 months. But by the time I got to that race, I was feeling so good. And on day 3, I was getting faster and faster each day. So day 1, I took it easy, lesson learned, and I didn't have any coffee or caffeine supplements. By day 2, I was faster than day 1. By day 3, I was making really good progress. And for the first time since I started any of this, I felt like a runner, and I felt like I belonged in an ultramarathon running race. And so I'd overcome this imposter syndrome because after the first race, everyone came up to me and they're like, hey, you ran through a desert. And deep down, I knew I hadn't actually run. I'd walked or hobbled across this desert. But this was the first time where I was like, I'm running. I feel really good. I feel comfortable. I feel like I look natural out here. And so I'd overcome this imposter syndrome and felt like I finally belonged in one of these races. And then Jordan, last year, through Wadi Rum, the Arabian desert, my goal was to come in the top 20. And unexpectedly, the conflict between Israel and Palestine breaks out just weeks before the race. And the race gets cancelled 2 weeks before the race. And there was a decision of, I've been training, should I just go anyway and run through a desert by myself without any of the race organizers? And so about a week before I was going to jump on a flight, one of the other competitors who I'd met in the Atacama race, who was in this Jordan race, reaches out to me and says, hey, I'm going to go anyway and run. Would you like to come with me? Like, it looks like you're interested. And I said yes. and I just say yes and throw yourself into any situation. And this guy, he's ex-military. I think he's just hit 50 this year, but he's an exceptional runner. And he was always front of the pack. And in the Atacama race, I'd just never see him. I'd see him at the start of the race and then at camp and nothing in between because he's so far ahead. But I had this unique opportunity to run side by side with somebody who's an incredible athlete, which in a race I would never normally get to do. But because I agreed to just go along, and it's me and this guy running through the Jordan desert, doing I guess half the distance, so about 75 miles over 3 days. I just learned so much about running and pacing and interval sprints, and from somebody who I normally wouldn't really get to run with. And so the big lesson there was, just say yes. When unexpected things happen, just say yes, throw yourself into a situation, and you'll be surprised what you can learn. And then finally, I ran a race in Namibia this year through the Namib Desert, one of the most ancient deserts on the planet, the oldest deserts. And I continued my goal of coming top 20. And to my surprise, I came in the top 10%. I finished fastest in age and gender, like 30s male category. And, you know, I started off day one, came in 18th, then 12th, then 11th, then 8th by day 4. And the unexpected part was the lesson there. It was, this race knocked all of the hubris out of me. It was so humbling. With 3 of these races under the belt, I just felt like I could take on any race, any time, and I'd be great. The temperatures in Namibia were, for the first 3 or 4 days, they were about 40 Celsius, about 100 Fahrenheit. By day 4 or 5, we were hitting, the maximum temperature reach was 54 Celsius, which is 130 Fahrenheit. It was just so brutally hot. It was dry. Ironically, I got the runs. So I had an upset stomach. My bag broke. I had to duct tape it together and use some of the pins from my first aid kit to put this thing back together. Like, everything went wrong. I was feeling heavy. It was just tough and grueling. It was so hot. But the big thing that changed is this time I was running to raise money for charity, and that was a huge motivation factor. And so I was no longer just doing this thing for myself, even though I had this time goal. It was to help bring women out of poverty in Tanzania. And so every time I felt like, you can just walk and finish this race, I thought, no, there are people who have committed money to seeing me finish these goals. And so that just pushed me through forwards. And so the big takeaways, the lessons learned, back to your question, Jay, is first, if you want to do your own 0 to 150, just do it. Don't think for more than 5 seconds. Sign up to your goal. Tell people, put some financial commitment down, put some social commitment down. My business partner with the book took this philosophy and just started saying yes to a bunch of things. And we turned what became speaking gigs into a business. Break down big problems into smaller problems. Overcoming imposter syndrome. Well, everyone says fake it till you make it. I would say do it until you enjoy it. And it's only once I started enjoying it, I felt like I belonged in this place. With the Jordan race, the lesson is just say yes. You never know where it's going to take you, which unexpected people you can meet. And then probably the last lesson is do it for others. I think ego can play a big role, but when you're in service of others, it's such a much more powerful motivating force to not let other people down than it is to let yourself down. So there's 4 big lessons there.
Yeah, no, great lessons there. Absolutely. Do it for others, really, to me, always comes back to purpose, right? Is living something bigger than yourself. I always said that when our time's done here on this earth, our life's impact will never be measured on what we acquired. It'll be the impact we had on other people's lives. You know what I mean? Robin Sharma wrote a great book, Who Will Cry When You Die? And it isn't of loss, it's in celebration of all the lives that you touched. And I think that's a really wonderful point that you made there. So it's an incredible story, man. It really is. It's very inspiring. And I'm sure there's people out here right now listening, thinking about their moment, and their thing and what that may be, and something that's already chattering in the back of their head that they've been, trying to make a decision whether to act upon. I think you just pushed them to make that decision. So, look, we mentioned the book, and I don't want to leave our interview here today, because I really am interested in knowing, 5 ways to innovate so I'd be interested, maybe we can just touch on them briefly and we can have you back at a different time to go in more depth, but I'd really love to touch on it if you have time before you leave.
Of course, I'd love to. So, The 5 Ways to Innovate is a book on corporate innovation. My business partner and I, we have been, consultants for a big part of our career, then moved into big tech. I'm currently at Google. He led digital transformation at Meta across Asia Pacific. And when we were consultants, we looked at over 100 companies and said, how do we make innovation systems more simple? Because everyone seems to have a different framework and a different way of approaching it, and it looked like it had just become this complicated, complex mess. And so when we looked at how the best innovators on the planet innovate, really it came down to, you could boil everything they do into just 5 ways, and we formalized that into a system, and the 5 ways being upskilling, an innovation hub, a startup studio, an incubator, or an ecosystem play. We can talk another time about each of those 5, but the big thing, once we laid it out like that stood out, is the first, upskilling, is the most invested form of innovation. You can, if you believe your company has the ability to innovate and the right people, and we've boiled down a bunch of factors to figure out whether you should do invested innovation tactics, then if you believe in your own people, then you need to take more invested innovation approaches. On the flip side, an ecosystem play is the most divested innovation approach. That is, for whatever reason, you are either unable to right now or choose not to do the innovation yourself, and you want to let the market do the work. And so you fund the market to do the work and then bring those back into your company. And then in the middle is some blend of each of those. So this realization that invested, divested, 5 ways, we laid it all out. And the book started just off as a presentation at the Innovators Conference in Manila about probably 6-7 years ago now. And after my business partner delivered this presentation at an innovation conference, people came out of the woodwork and said, hey, can you deliver this presentation for our board of directors? Can you do it for this team? Can you do it for that team? And we thought, great, we can do that. And they said, okay, what happens next? Can you help us figure out which are the right 5 ways and get those set up? And so what started off as a presentation ended up becoming a business, all through demand. And we had this decision of, how do we spread this message further? We can't keep going around doing talks and podcasts. And so we said, we should write all of this down and all the best advice we have and publish it in a book so we can get the reach and get this thing out to the people who've been demanding it so much. And so we sat down to write a book, and I'd love to come back and talk to you more about it.
We'll certainly do that. So is the book out? And if not, when does it come out?
It is not out yet. We are planning to have it out within the next year, and we're just working through it with publishers to make that happen.
Wonderful. Well, we'll keep an eye out. So why don't you then, as it's soon to be released, why don't you reach out to me and we can schedule another time and do some early promo and get it into the hands of our people here. And I look forward to reading it.
Thank you. We'll do. Maybe a parting message for all of the listeners.
Please.
There's an old adage that journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And so over the last 5 years, I've actually run well over 1,000 miles. And the way to get from 0 to 50 is by starting with that single step. So for anyone out there with their own 0 to 150 goal or ambition, then unfulfilled dream that seems too hard to start, the advice is take the first step and everything else will start to fall into place.
Great words of wisdom. Roshan, I really appreciate you coming on today. What a fascinating story. Again, look forward to having you back on, talk about the book, dive into the 5 steps and really be able to grasp it further and help my audience understand for themselves and their businesses, or in any aspect of life. I'm sure this can be applied in other areas as well too. So again, thanks for getting up so early and spending some time with us.
Thank you. It's been wonderful to be here.
So Triple P Nation, that's Roshan Chhotu. I always say, you be you, but just be the best you. And I promise you, will always empower your dreams, ignite your passion, and accelerate your prosperity. Until next week, everybody, be well.